In this video we will cover 3 common approaches to query SQL databases. At the end of this video you should be able to tell which approach best suits your application. Let's start off with building a common understanding of what those 3 approaches are. First, we have plain SQL. SQL is the language that relational databases understand. There is an SQL standard, but every database has its own SQL dialect. Because of this, with plain SQL we often target a single database implementation. Using plain SQL gives us maximum control and performance, and it also allows us to access all the features the specific database implementation provides to us. The second approach to query data within databases is by using query builders. Query builders allow us to create queries using the builder pattern. We can chain various parts of a query together by calling methods on a builder instance. This approach allows us to build more database agnostic queries. The query builder can generate the SQL for a configured dialect. And with TypeScript or any other statically typed language, we are more likely to detect syntactic or semantic errors during compile time. So by using query builders we trade a bit of control and performance for compile time validation and more unified queries. The third approach to querying SQL databases is using object relational mappers. An object relational mapper, also known as ORM, is an even more abstract tool than a query builder. As the name suggests, object relational mappers map objects to relational database records and vice versa. Relations can be resolved by this tool, and whole data trees can be fetched, created, updated or deleted with a single abstract query. Under the hood, there are often multiple SQL queries executed for one abstract ORM query. Like the query builders, ORMs provide type safety. And on top, we trade even more control and performance for more abstract data fetching. So now that we have a basic understanding of those 3 approaches, let's compare SQL to query builders. As mentioned before, query builders aim to provide a type-safe way to execute SQL queries. This improves the development experience and the development speed. They also partly eliminate differences between dialects and as such make our queries more portable across various database engines. So far I used Juke in Java and Nex and Kiseli for TypeScript. All those query builders provide ways to execute raw SQL queries, so you don't miss out on database specific features if you need them. Speaking of Kiseli, I really enjoy using this library. If you are interested in a video about this topic, let me know in the comments below. The obvious downsides of using query builders are that they add additional payload to your application and a bit of runtime overhead during creating those queries. Both impacts are relatively small and don't matter in most applications. Here a little side note, there is a tool in Go that's called SQLC. It allows us to write our queries within plain SQL. The SQL compiler then generates functions and data types which we can pick up in our data access layer. So we don't need any runtime dependency anymore. I just saw that there is an npm package in development which will port SQLC to TypeScript. That's very interesting. Okay, let's now compare ORMs to query builders. Just for context, my experience with ORMs so far is based on Hibernate in Java and Objection in TypeScript. While building queries with a query builder is only a thin layer of abstraction over SQL, most object relational mappers will allow you to execute operations on records within the database without having a lot of SQL knowledge. This sounds very nice, right? This approach works fine for many CRUD operations. However, in more complex applications, there can be various types of issues depending on the ORM implementation. With Hibernate, for example, in the past I faced issues with internal caching and with inefficient querying of related records. If the documentation for the ORM is not very well written, then you find yourself quickly digging deep into the implementation to find the cause of the issue. And when we eventually find the cause of the issue, it may be very difficult or even impossible to solve it with the ORM itself, and we have to file back to a query builder or even native SQL. So, if you use the traditional object relational mapper, it may be that you come less in touch with SQL, but you will learn a lot about this specific ORM itself. And I think we both know which skill is more valuable in the long term. Spoiler alert, it's not the ORM. An approach that I find promising though is the one of Drizzle. Drizzle is quite new and it already gained a lot of adoption. If I went the ORM route, I would take a look at this library next. It's basically a query builder with additional abstractions. And a comforting promise from their side is that Drizzle always only executes one single SQL query. This makes things much easier to reason about. As a summary, here's a table of the strengths and weaknesses of the three querying approaches we just discussed. SQL is our baseline, so we don't see any entries here. The TypeScript query builders of today will have a little payload and performance impact. But if we can use an SQL compiler, this little drawback will not be valid anymore. Because of this, it's placed in parentheses. In my experience, the development speed increases slightly. This is due to the static typing and compile time validation of the queries. And the development experience can be very good. I especially enjoyed using Kiseli. When we look at ORMs, we definitely have a drawback in payload and performance. The development speed may be faster as with a query builder because there are more abstract queries. On the other hand, the development speed and the development experience can also suffer from the issues that an ORM can introduce into your project. All in all, I suggest defaulting to a query builder. The type safety really pays off, and the impact on the performance and the payload is very low. But if you are building an app with a lot of simple CRUD operations, I won't stop you from using an ORM. But only if performance and payload doesn't really matter in your case, like for example in many back-office applications. In this case, I would recommend using something like Drizzle, where you start off building SQL-like queries and only occasionally do graph operations. If my video about Kiseli is already published, you will find it here. Here will be another interesting video for you. In this sense, never stop learning and see you in the next video.